Thanks everyone coming out on this Saturday evening to American Grammar. So we have a very special guest with us, Thor Conroe, who wrote the infamous novel Fuckboy. Yeah, we've been doing sort of like literary discussions here for roughly about a year. I read Sean's book. I was basically reading a bunch of like novels that were set in Philly, and I thought I also lived in this city around like 2017, 2018. Also Sean went to Swarthmore. I had like friends who went to Swarthmore. I went to Haverford, so reading the book was like very interesting. He like references like some of these places that I've been. I also lived like around like 40th and Market, so there's just all of these sort of references that I thought were really interesting. There's a lot of controversy around this book, which I think is also really interesting, and so between all those things, we thought it would be like cool to bring him down to sort of like talk about the book and the content of it. I think we're going to start with having him read a bit of it, and then I've got some like questions, Terrance and I. If that sounds good. So, if you want to.
Okay, nice. Yeah. It's been a minute since the book came out, but happy to come back to Philly and return to the scene of the crime.
Sure.
Yeah, I was looking at some of the pages of this the other day. I thought this part was funny, and I'll read it for this. Where is it? One second. Dang. I haven't looked at this in a minute. Where are we at? Oh yeah, right here.
Sure.
Yeah. I thought this bit was kind of funny. I was looking back on it.
Sure.
Well, my bit. This is when he's thinking back on when he's living in Philly. Yeah, I was looking at some of the alleys in South Philly that were cleared out, and someone was saying, "Oh, yeah, this used to be a really messed up alley." And this is reminding me of the back alley in West Philly where I was living at. But it was when my big cousin E's boss asked him at midnight on a Sunday whether he knew anyone able to be in D.C. by sunup for a week-long job. He had to have been joking. Been sort of thinking aloud, vocalizing his wishful thoughts. Musing. But big cousin E's boss, he didn't know about this guy. He didn't know I'd be just risen, drinking my first coffee of the waking cycle when that call came in. That I just had a convo with the ma earlier that day before I passed out about how if nothing gave within the next 72, I'd be left with no choice but to start over. To give up my spot in Philly, fly back to Cali, and move into her living room. Credit maxed out, debit down to double digits. Postmates impossible due to snow. Last week tried to go out mid-blizzard and got stuck in, literally slowed to a stop, had to dismount and wade out of the middle of a snowed-in intersection. To deliver a calzone, a single calzone, to a grad student who, this motherfucker saw me balaclava it up, slipping and sliding in the snowsuit. Didn't even tip. $4 even for an hour-long mish that left me damn near hypothermic. So yeah, when I got that 1 a.m. call to be in D.C. by 6, I was down. Wasn't trying to move back in with the mob. That hit way too many mid-20s artist guy, sensitive bro, broken by a breakup tropes. Plus, all I heard was a 500 day rate. All I needed to hear. Alright, then he describes getting his head out of the back of his backyard where, alright, that's good.
Sure. Cool.
Let's stop there.
Great. So, like, there's a lot of stuff in this book that I think I was like interested in hearing your opinion on. So the stuff, I recently read a book by Emma Copley Heisenberg called Housemates. And Housemates takes place in West Philly, similar to your book, but it actually covers like a group of people that your character sort of like makes fun of. Like he talks about like the woke sort of kombucha people who live in the upper 40s, right? Okay. And I thought it was like kind of interesting that like sort of like with the political climate that like we're in, like rereading your book and like there's all this stuff about like woke. I'm like kind of like, how do you feel like, where do you feel like your book lands like now? You know what I'm saying? Like now in terms of, because I feel like there's like what I liked a lot about the book was like, you know, I feel like similarly, like I went to like a liberal arts school and there was like a lot of like sort of like, I would say like sort of like corny like political sort of posturing, right? Which I like definitely like resonated, you know, like with your book, you like kind of make fun of a lot of that. And so like, and then also trying to grapple with like, what does it mean to be like, sort of like a man in sort of like a 21st century like urban, you know what I'm saying? Like setting, and also somebody who's like, you know, kind of like racially ambiguous, right? I think these are all things that like when people talk about your book, they don't really ever touch on. Like people just talk about like, you know, like the bro speak or like the Sam Pink controversy, but I actually think those are like the most interesting things to me. And like even the way you like, for instance, like write about like gentrification, like and the actual like architecture of the city is like really interesting to me because like I lived basically in around the same area you did in like 2017, 2018, and that area is completely like transformed because of like gentrification. So I'm like kind of curious, like I guess this is like, these are all like a bunch of different observations, but like sort of like you say, you have the part in the book where you talk about Shayla Hetty and she talks about how basically she like motherhood gets like viewed as like the super political word. Right. But it's not. And I feel like that's the thing with you is like you're like, I'm just like a writer, you know, I'm not trying to make a political statement, but then there's all these things you're trying to like say in the book. And like I guess I don't know if you
I think I know what you're asking. I think I know what you're saying. I mean I think well like I think one thing about what you're saying, you know, the narrator making fun of certain you know, he's making fun of a lot of, he's making fun of himself a lot. But it's like, you know, the narrator, where does that lead him? You know, he gets further and further isolated. I think like a political inscrutability to an artwork is really important, but it also makes it not easily marketable. Like I think I'm the only book that's been like positively or intermediately reviewed in like Jacobin and like Unheard. I don't know if you know what those are, but those
I know what Jacobin is.
Conflicting. Yeah, it's just like the other spectrum. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I think that's like a really important thing. I think if you know, there's the kind of first half of the book where he's spouting off and you're supposed to be kind of repulsed or confused, and then like there's like a severe breakdown, a reevaluation of everything. Like, and I think it did come out of that time when everything was moral posturing, and there is like a rage, but I think it's not, you know, I think like it's like Jacobin was saying like, oh, this would be, you know, he's on Snap, he gets, you know, he's like talking about the healthcare system, and then like on the other side of the spectrum they're like, oh, this wasn't even, you know, they're both like dissatisfied or something like that. But I think that, I mean, I think that an artwork that is easily kind of taken in under the umbrella of one political side, which I think is pretty much most artworks. You know, might not be easily accepted at the time, but I think that's like important.
But for you, is the aesthetic or the ethical like primary? Like, are you making some kind of ethical intervention by attempting to represent this morally ambiguous character, or is it that the moral ambiguity of the character is something that you believe in for the aesthetic value of the book and are willing to like stand on in order to achieve something artistic, even if you'll take critique or receive criticism from the woke crowd? That's like part one. But then the other thing I was thinking about, you said the narrator.
Yeah.
You saw how he distanced himself from this character.
Definitely.
And that's one of the interesting parts about auto-fiction. And I was gonna like thinking as an iteration of the question that I just asked, is the narrator standing in critique of the writer that you were as you attempted to write, or is the narrator in some respects vindicating your ethical sensibility? Does that make sense? Like, because there's this narrator that you've written that is clearly autobiographical, right? There are notes
based on,
there are traces of the life that you've lived. Right? And a lot of people who are criticizing the novel, like not critical, like in reading the novel and interpreting it, right? are suggesting that the narrator is morally problematic, and they're attributing the morally problematic traits of the narrator to you as an author.
Right.
Right. And so those two questions, if you could just like expand on.
Okay. I think that's the question. Well, just the question with the autofiction stuff. I think like there's a progression in art, in writing, you know, kind of identifying the self in like a story from like purely allegorical, you know, to like more and more operating with a type of realism.
Yep.
And the heightening of the realism, I think, is like the thing that progresses the form forward. Like that's why I'm kind of only focusing on I've kind of only been working on Dante stuff, so I'm kind of thinking about Dante a lot, you know. But before then, it was just like epics, and everyone was like an allegorical form. And he was the first person to like kind of make it more real and say like, oh, I looked over my left shoulder and I saw, you know, there's this progression towards more and more immediacy and the feeling that the narrator is telling you something that he experienced. You know, that's why I feel like that's why like with Nausgard, that was the trick of Nausgard, right? Where he's like, oh no, these things happen to me. You know what I mean? But it's still for me, it's much more finding the allegorical or the universal from a narrator that it feels like it's real. So it is partially aesthetic. Like I like a narrator that I don't know if I like or not, and I'm repulsed by, you know, that's the thing I like in fiction. But there's also explicitly political element where for this book, from writing from this time, where it's like, you know, it's sort of like embodying a bunch of outlooks that are repulsive or off-putting, and you know it's going to be off-putting, and then constantly toggling it to like whether this narrator's worthy of empathy or understanding where they're coming from. So it's like, it's not, you know, this is a device, calling the narrator my name and saying a bunch of things I did in my bio, and then having him do those things. That's a device.
Yeah,
you know,
part of the story.
Yeah, and putting the face on the cover, something happens in your brain where you're like, oh, he's telling me everything. But with the title and everything, it's like I'm saying universal things. I understand that it's written from a narrator at a time when like somebody who's in this position of who he is and having certain thoughts about whatever, whether it's a political thing or a gendered thing. I know that they're not worthy of being listened to, you know, at the time. So I'm just saying, having the narrator say those things, and the effect is like jarring. We're like, whoa, why would they say all these things about themselves, you know? And then you have to suddenly start questioning your own moral.
So they come together, the aesthetic and the ethical.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So I like that effect as a reader, but there is some like kind of like philosophical thing going on, I feel like. And
even the humor of the novel depends upon the reader identifying, at least in part, with this narrative.
Yeah.
Right? So there's a kind of it's revelatory, like multiple times. Like our consciousness is always negotiating the various possible ways we could respond to someone who's offended us, who's charmed us,
right?
And like this narrator puts all those problematic things on the surface,
right? And and I think the relationship between the author and the narrator, or like me and the narrator when I'm writing it, is like, you know, I'm laughing at the narrator a lot. You know what I mean? I think it's funny.
Yeah, no, it's a funny book. It's a funny book. If you haven't read it, this is a funny book.
It's a funny book.
On many levels. Like the character's funny, the language is funny.
And I think it's rebelling against like the self-seriousness of literature and the self-seriousness of the political climate at the time. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's how I felt. I was going in on it.
Yeah, like real world shit. Every self-hating woke American would do well by acquainting themselves with. But self-hating woke Americans didn't have
Okay.
Like it's
That made you laugh?
I don't remember. Yeah, it's funny. Like I don't know. Like
Well, I think another thing that progresses like kind of fiction forward, and you have to also understand that this came out of like this wasn't supposed to be on, and I've told the story a lot, but it's relevant to what we're talking about now. Like this wasn't supposed to be out in the way it did with like the mass press, and, you know, which led to all the, you know, the backlash or controversy or whatever, which was just like, you know, a book that was propelled up to a way much wider audience due to like, you know, people passing away and stuff like that. But you know, my editor who edited this, Gian, from Tyrone Books, it's like these are kind of niche books, but they often have this kind of outsider. He was drawn to that kind of narrator or story that was outside of like the types of characters that are depicted in society and depicted in literature. You know what I'm saying?
Can you talk a little bit about how you came to write this book, and then particularly in this form?
Yeah. Well, and just to finish that thought, I feel like this idea of having that's another thing I feel that progresses with literature is like expanding who gets included into like literature. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So like this is like, but yeah, in terms of how I wrote the book was yeah, I kind of was writing it for that editor, you know, and a lot of the authors he was drawn to are kind of speaking in there's an orality to a lot of the authors he's drawn to. There's a kind of there's a punk element to his authors, but then there's also kind of because at the end of the day, it is someone trying to encapsulate all his different selves and like become a speaking, art-making, writing subject. You know what I mean? It is like it does follow that form of someone becoming a writer. You know, but I did feel like you know I had a lot of different kind of like identities I straddled and no core identity. You know, and like you said,
like
in my real life as a person, and I did, you know, and I went through Swarthmore, and kind of went away from it for a really long time, and it was a thing where I'd been writing a lot of books, kind of trying to put on a certain voice, and then getting to a place where, you know, kind of rebelliously just being like, no, this counts as literature too. You know, in terms of the voice and the flow I developed, you know, I think like, you know, people often also say like, oh, is this like how you talk? Is this how we really, you know, it's like, I talk in many different ways, different contexts, but the point is it has to be a self-contained like flow within the book and everything, you know, it's almost like a code, like a specific code that's developed. So like, once I kind of started with this flow, I just like, made it fit and then would veer off it in terms of going more slang and more vernacular and like you know how I text to people, and then also just constantly going against your expectations about what this type of person is, and I think it was that feeling of like just like having different sides and like letting them all live on the from one narrator, like, and toggling it. Yeah,
I was like, so it's interesting you bring up the part about sort of like how in many ways the book is like somebody who's like also like on like an artist's, you know what I'm saying? Like journey.
Absolutely.
And I remember like one part I really liked was the part where he sends to editor day, he sends his you know the draft of the walk book, and then like she reads it and she gives him like feedback. You know what I'm saying? And like he really, I mean, he's like he like cries, right? And it's like he really feels like seen. I think it's like very feeling like really seen, you know, for the first time. And yeah, like I guess like, you know, again, this book was published a couple years ago now. And what do you think, like, just in a more personal sense, like, as like a writer, how do you feel like you've progressed like since this book? You know what I'm saying? Like since this book sort of just come out? Like, what do you think you've been like working on as just a writer, I guess?
Yeah. I mean, I've been working on a lot of different things, but yeah, I've been writing a lot of essays, working on next books.
Sure.
Yeah, just like. But you mean in terms of like the form?
Yeah, in terms of like the form, and then also thinking about like, I guess like, you know what I'm saying, like progression.
Yeah.
I feel like that's like something that you're like interested in continuing like to write about, right? Is this idea of like, because I feel like a big part of this is just like the character being like, I want to make art, and
right.
And that is like what I want to do, and I just want to read and write all the time, and I feel like that's like, I feel like oftentimes like protagonists like that's like there are books with like writers, but it's like really like. He's not somebody who's like established, right? It's like he's like just trying to figure it out, and isn't in like an MFA, isn't
right.
You know,
yeah. There's a desperation in a kind of like, like romantic, like sorrow's a young werther type way to the narrator and to the way the book is written. Like it's kind of like you're gonna read this and you're gonna like feel things like immediately, So I think like. In terms of like when you're, and I think there is that element of it of like wanting to inspire people to kind of write in a way that feels natural to them and not feel like they have to like cower some standard or be a certain way in order to be allowed to like make art. There's a very like, all the little B stuff, there's a very like, most of the notes I get from people are like feeling like they can suddenly gushing out and they can suddenly start writing. But I think like in terms of progression as a writer, like there is also like a kind of anti-literary, almost anti-reading, like it's like, I would often be yelling at people like, no one cares about your story. Like no one cares about it. You need to write something urgent and like vulnerable and like fast and like funny or sad immediately, you know what I mean? And I think that came from like the breaking point that I had where I was like, no one's even reading, people want all these things from like the literary world, and it's like, let's say you got all the things you want, like are you really affecting anybody? Like it's a small circle of people who are like, so it's like I felt that kind of like bubbling up inside me and wanting to like write something like radical and like shocking and like kind of terrifying, but I think also more now, I'm constantly reading. I mean, that's the thing I've been writing a lot is like essays and like in a lot of ways where it's like sort of like showing how you can read in a way and engage in literature in a way that like can like tangibly apply to your. I don't know. There's an element of a guy who's going through the world and like reading things and like making that jump of like applying them to his life versus just like I don't know what other people. I don't know how people.
What's the relationship between your fictional work and your essays?
Well, I think my essays, I feel like I'm often trying to show kind of how to read, like and how to read in a way where.
How do you read a sentence with no verbs?
What you mean?
No, I'm joking.
No. I mean like engage. I mean, he's engaging with a lot of different artworks, right? And they're directly impacting how he's writing, how he's living.
Yeah.
And I think like
so it's like attunement, like a kind of literary attunement. Like
your
essays are meant to.
Yeah, the essay. I feel like and the way to engage with books where it's like kind of in like a positive. I don't know. There's a lot of like I think the literary world's a lot like kind of like just like a bunch of writers just doing like sassy. I don't know. There's like this is good. This is bad. Don't buy. It's like I'm curious about like kind of like the intimacy of writing, like vulnerability. I don't know, like opening up and. I guess I've been writing a lot of essays.
Yeah, so
kind of like
so your fictional work so far is like meditations on how. I mean, it's like multifold, but meditations on how self is constituted culturally and linguistically at a specific moment, and how that affects both their the characters' experiences and people's perception of them. Right. So it's for someone to be the kind of narrator that you narrate in this book or that you write about in this book, you have to use a very specific vernacular. And like back to your point around encouraging writers to adopt the language and the form that's appropriate for what they feel like they want to express.
Yeah.
You can kind of only capture that if you deviate from certain conventions about how one ought to represent experience. And that's one of the reasons this sort of broke through and is celebrated.
Yeah.
And so that seems like a kind of, we can think about it as like a problematic. You might be a Swarthmore alum thinking about how do I capture some of the essential features of masculine formation at this particular moment. And the answer in part is I think about how speech has been impacted by the internet and various social media. And as an artist, I sort of channel that. So if you solve that problematic with respect to like one subject, like where do you go from there in terms of like the fictional?
Yeah, I don't know if it was that deliberate. Like I was never like
conscious of it.
Yeah, I was never trying to say anything about masculinity. I mean, I was noticing how elements of what I was going through in my life had like a universal quality at the time. That's really what I'm doing. It's like allowing someone to understand their life in like some bigger context.
Who's captured by the universal though? You said that 3 times.
Who's captured by the universal?
Yeah.
I think that's what writing a story is.
But finding the universal
in from your life. Like it's extrapolating the universal from your experience.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And in terms of
can you be specific, like in terms of the novel? Like what sorts of representation of this particular character's internal monologues speak to something that you would regard as universal?
Getting more and more myopically focused on. Sorry, you want to say something?
No, I mean,
well,
no, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just go ahead. It's like, at the time, being more and more feeling alienated from your society, from your peers, going more and more myopically fixated on certain ideas that get more and more distant from reality, and then like undergoing like a death and a rebirth. I think that's like, and then like, yeah.
Well, one of the things you mentioned,
and maybe using literature to help you get to that place.
Yeah, because one of the things you mentioned, like, the narrator mentions, is like MRA, which I think is like men's rights activists.
Absolutely.
And like this is what's like so interesting, because again, I don't think people like engage with. I mean, I don't know. I haven't read like a ton of reviews of the book or whatever, but like it doesn't feel like people are like engaging with like how the book tries to like deal with like you know what I'm saying, like masculinity, because like it is like I had a friend from like high school who got really into the MRA stuff and like started self-identifying as an incel like right around this time. And then like now like I remember like when I read the men's rights activist stuff, I was like, oh, like now if this book was getting written, it would be like Andrew Tate, like TikToks or something like that. And it's like that's like not stuff that's like written about like the characters like obviously has like a critique of the men, you know what I'm saying? But then also has these other things going on where he's like maybe you're talking about like going down like becoming like myopic. He could go down like a rabbit hole of like becoming like a men's rights activist or something. Like it's possible,
but the world takes him out of it.
Yeah. And I think that's like really interesting, because I think usually like in like a lot of literature we don't get depictions of people who, you know what I'm saying? Are become like deeply alienated. That could be
Well, yeah. I mean, historically the alienated, often male, but not necessarily, but like alienated narrators. That's a classic historical, vehicle or narrator. But there was definitely it was definitely that. I wasn't didactically saying anything about it. It was showing like how like kind of the results of narrator going down certain rabbit holes, but also not kind of discrediting or ridiculing the kind of circumstances that led him to that place and feelings of usefulness. And it's funny, like I think because the slang's so crazy, I think my book didn't get translated that much because people just don't know how to translate it.
Sure.
But the one place it got translated was Romanian, and I was like, it's like this is like the competition. It's like drawing, and this is drawing people away from Andrew Tate. But lost my train of thought with that Andrew Tate riff. But no, there's definitely I mean. Like, what is the thing that this Faulkner guy, Philip Weinstein, who's actually a Swarthmore teacher, he's retired now, but he was a modernist teacher there for a long time. But he says about, for example, like, you know, Jason Compson in like Sound and Fury, who's just saying the most insane things, you know.
Yeah, but the thing about this, the narrator is also is a complicated narrator, because I was struck by the way that they always seem to be conscious of their gendered position.
Right.
That was what,
and like going out of their way to avoid appearing a certain way.
Right.
And that was sort of what I was like, kind of confused, I guess, about maybe. And I think maybe it's like intentional, because I was talking to a boy about this yesterday, and he was like, "No, you don't get it. Like that's the point. That's why it's like a fuck boy, because he's got this like, you know, could be, you know, super anti-woke, you know, men's rights activist, but then also has this kind of like, he's like thinking about,
no,
like,
he's criticizing
this way.
Well, yeah, so just to finish that thought, what I was saying was that with the narrator like Jason Compson, who's saying all these misogynistic, racist things in Sound and Fury, like these are real perspectives that are in Faulkner's time. And it's like there's this thing of like looking at the perspectives of your time and like not judging them, but not like sentimentally excusing them. That's what he says, and that kind of straddling of looking at both sides of a moral problem is what literature is. It's not what a lot of literature does now, in my opinion. But it's looking at the book is looking at if we're going to stay with the political idea, which is totally part of it. Like I'm totally straddling things the whole time. It's looking at the destructive elements of both. Being upset about a breakup and looking at certain ideas on, you know, men's rights stuff, but it's also looking at the destructive elements of constantly questioning everything you do and whether it's okay if you're a man or not, and if you need to, you know. So it's looking at both of them, and they're both kind of funny.
No,
they should be funny, but if you get triggered too quick, then you might throw the books out. But that's the thing. You want to. That's what the writing advice is to trigger just enough, but not to the point to throw the book across the room.
But you know, you need a little bit
but
of.
But maybe you throw the book. Some writers, I throw the book across the room and then I think about it for 2 weeks and I come back up.
I feel like you know, I'm not against a little bit of edge. I think it's like good. One of the other things I thought was interesting too, having lived in Philly in this time, like 2017, 2018, is like the subject also is like, as much as like. I think the book, in many ways, like the main subject is like he's like thinking about a lot of things, but he's like relatively like sort of like apolitical. I remember like the part where he rides past like the Proud, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, the Proud
Boy rally, and it's like really interesting because like I feel like at least for me, like thinking about it is that like okay, so on like one side you have all of these like super like woke, you know, saying like rat, you know, right, like kind of like liberal, you know, PC culture people, and then you have like kind of the right, but like where does like, and maybe this isn't something you've like thought about or we're like trying to examine in the book, but I'm like, where does like Antifa factor into this? Because you know, going out and like beating up Nazis or whatever, that's like not politically, you know what I'm saying? Like politically correct. Or going to prison because you know what I'm like. I think that's something that also I liked about the book, like coming back to like the way you talk about like gentrification, like it's like the people that are like the most woke are also the people that are like gentrifying like West Philly. So I don't know. I just thought that was
Okay. So you're saying, but see, it's interesting because as soon as you start straddling all these different things, and have a narrator that's apolitically moving through it, or at least like never settled in his political views, because almost every chapter is like. He comes through convinced about something, and then something happens in the world that upsets it. Then people bring whatever they feel close to their heart. So you're like, well, what about Antifa?
Where's Antifa?
But then people will come, you know, and say, what about the neoliberal feminism rant you did? Like, you know, everyone has a thing, but I think that
because I'm like, I think choosing to be a political actor, right, is like, because I think this is getting into what I'm talking about, like the Sheila Heti part, where you're like, okay, motherhood isn't a political book, right? And like, I think like you have this part where you're like, okay, and I agree with this actually. You're like, artists are artists. People who are doing other things are doing like other things, and those are like different things.
That's pretty much what I was going to say.
And I think that's like critical. Like it's a critical part.
Absolutely. And
because there's a lot of like people who think that I wrote a novel. I'm like, you know, doing something for some. You know what I'm saying?
For doing something for a cause.
Yeah, for a cause.
Exactly. Well, it's just I think I'm meaning to say something about like what the calling of, because I mean once you way past all the jokes and the kind of like outlandish, kind of the first season is like you're meant to, I'm just like kind of saying wild things that for the reader to get kind of jolted by. Like it really is like a story about like somebody responding to some inner calling and figuring out how to be like an artist. I'm saying something about what this path is and what this vocation is, and like it's not, and it is like kind of I don't know. I was thinking about this I've been rereading a lot of this Dante and thinking about it, but he has this one, because he got exiled for two political factions, one with the Pope and one with the state, basically just wreaking havoc in both, but he puts them both in hell, like the leaders of the two groups, and he says that the sin is a heresy because they're applying religious fervor to their political, to the desire to beat their political opponents. You know what I mean? But he legitimately thinks that his calling, like he applies religious fervor to his art. You know what I mean? And there is an element of no spirit, no religion, or no God in this world, and it's like, and a lot of that's applied to the political, into the political realm, and that's why all the moral, it's like it is. I see that today.
It's like religious.
Yeah, it's totally religious. It's like. Going on a like doing a religious attack, doing a religious war, against, and that there's a moral high.
You're talking about the political sectarianism.
Absolutely, yeah. And but then you have no home. You have no, if everything's political and but I don't want.
Can you remind us when did you write this?
I wrote this. From right after, I started right before I left Philly, and then it was 2019.
Okay. And so
2018, 2019.
Would you say that we still are caught up in the same moment? Like there's nothing about things that have transpired. I mean, obviously the coronavirus happened, but politically and culturally, do you think that the context that produced this is still pretty much intact?
No, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's coming back now because we're in an election year. But no, I don't know. I think a lot of the moral Puritanism has been jolted out from. I mean, everyone had their own experience, but for a lot of people, a pretty harrowing 2020 year. Yeah. I don't know. What do you think? It's funny.
I think it's still too soon to be determined.
Woke has come to mean like a million different things. All these words.
I mean, and it's interesting what sort of things we can say about the world are so contingent upon our particular specific experience.
Yeah.
And so as you know, I teach, and like sometimes I fall prey to the idea that the students who elect to take my class constitute an entire generation, right? And so you could be too presumptuous.
Well, what do you get based off of your sample size?
Well, I mean, my classes tend to attract students that would take offense to some of the things that you say, and you would probably describe or categorize the narrator as woke, right?
Right.
And so you can too easily assume that everyone agrees that women should have a right to abortion. That
I would hope you get offended by something.
No, but what I'm saying is that I'm not experienced enough and exposed to enough in the world to necessarily say definitively how people are feeling about anything. I just know that my circle is comprised of people that feel a very particular way, and then I can see what's represented. But it's hard to say. It's hard to understand. Like the moment that we're living through.
The only thing I think it's like it's interesting to talk about 2020's jolting people, out of like the woke stuff. And again, I think about this a lot because I think about riots all the time, and like it's like like I think that like a lot of the like sort of like in 2020, right? It was like I feel like it was like I think for me at least I was thinking a lot about like it's like how do you be like a woke white person if it's like black people like burning down like black businesses or something like that. And I feel like like there's ways in which I think like I don't know, like I understand what you're saying about like 2020 like jolting, you know what I'm saying, like jolting people out. It's like things were just like more complicated, you know what I'm saying, like more complicated. I think like 2020 like maybe proved, you know what I'm saying, and like the tail end of 2021. But it's like, okay, maybe this is like important because we haven't asked you our like central question for this series. So what does it mean to be American? What does it mean to be American? And what does the, because I feel like this novel is like very quintessentially American, and like 21st century American. What does it mean to like be American? And like how do you feel like as like a novelist or like a writer, you're like reacting to that?
Yeah, well, we talked about it in our email thread a little bit, and I did immediately think of maybe a kind of problematic example, but maybe not actually. Maybe a perfectly relevant example, and I wrote about it in this Roth essay I did, and it was a thing that the narrator of what's that book called, The Human Stain, wrote, and The Human Stain is about a white passing black. I hope I'm just.
No, you cool.
Professor.
Philip Roth. I don't know if you know.
Yeah. So he's a white passing black professor who gets canceled for saying some. This makes it seem more dicey. So he gets canceled for saying something that's interpreted as racist, but he actually is black. And of course this is Philip Roth writing all this, but and he was that book is published in 2000, and he was responding to a lot of like the Lewinsky era Puritanism of the time, where everyone was like how could
it's funny though, really, but
it's similar
because you said it was canceled in 2000.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting.
The professor was.
But the cancel culture is like that's an interesting question. Like, when does cancel culture emerge?
Yeah. Oh, right.
True.
But but basically, he has this one rant in there where he was basically like saying that the freedom to invent yourself as a self outside of whatever group you're in is the quintessential American act. And I guess that's easier when you don't have a totally fixed, group that you're whether geographic or ethnic or cultural or whatever, and like it's maybe easier for me to say that, but I think that is the defining thing, kind of coming up with your own language, and that was
the ideal of America, like capital I.
Right.
Yeah. America, if we should achieve it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it was responding to like a lot of it's easier to belong to a group and where you're flat, but like that's what I.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because that connects in some respects to. We can talk about it as America. We can talk about it as capitalistic. But much of what plagues this narrator is the fact that they're thrust into a situation where they have to actually fashion a self without, like within aristocratic and feudal societies, like social mobility wasn't as much as an important phenomenon. One of the trade-offs of social mobility is that you actually do have to fashion a self. And one of the ways that we can do that is to fall into a certain white male masculinity or black male masculinity, like the gendered and the racial, that help you shore up a sense of self.
Right.
But in terms of how you think about this sort of possibility of fashioning a self in relationship to this narrator, like how important is art, place? Like what are the sort of elements of constructing the self that is worthy of the ideal? Because one of the things that even like the so your book manuscripts, I guess, on walking, is that coming out? What's the status of that?
Yeah, it probably comes out.
So it's a book.
Yeah,
we can call it a book. So like the walking book is sort of fallen into an American sort of trope called motif. It's not different from some of the things that we see transcendentalists thinking through. Like there's a Whitman-esque or Thoreauvian sort of component.
Right.
And so it seems like clearly you sort of imagine one of the things that needs to happen within the American context is eschewing certain conventional ideas about how to be and to actually discover a self that's in keeping with your sort of ideas about what's good, what's beautiful, and what's right. And in the novel, the narrator is doing that as a kind of bourgeoisie subject that is thrust into a specific locale.
What do you mean a bourgeoisie?
Well, I would say like maybe like an urban, like there's a term like urban precariat, and it's like kind of a similar thing with a lot of like novels that are written by like millennials often, which when you have a character who's like very educated, but is like downwardly mobile, working like a gig economy.
What do you mean that? Yeah.
You know, or maybe not downwardly mobile, upwardly mobile maybe.
Okay.
Because he goes to grad, he goes to, right? Isn't that the end of the?
No.
No.
I went to grad school and published it.
Oh, for publishing.
Yeah,
so upwardly mobile then.
Right.
But like in the sense that like I would say like an urban precariat. That's what I would say. I wouldn't say bourgeois. I wouldn't say bourgeois subject.
Bourgeois aspiring. I mean, but a novelist? How could a novel? I mean, does the working class write novels?
Like
the proletariat don't write
Bologna
novels.
bourgeois.
I mean, I think
that's
like,
where it's coming out of.
Isn't the form a class form? Like, does the work?
The novel is definitely a bourgeois.
Is it a form?
Right, but I'm saying so. In terms of your initial question about self-formation, like I think that like it definitely does think that like it does have a strong belief in like it's damn near a promotion. It's like promoting literature.
Yeah.
The book is almost like I was thinking
Right.
about changing my bio to literacy advocate. Like it's definitely like no, but it believes that
You're
it's
writing
like
yourself.
coming to yourself through this process, and outside of all other things, is part of what it's saying, I think. And then and in terms of like the walk stuff and all the kind of like heroic, like whether he's making fun of that idea or not, out here on his bike, on his horse, like trying to go on a quest. I think the work does have that, all my work in general does have that kind of energy of like, you don't need to like try to sleep, just start walking west and sleep outside every day to become a self. But like it does have some of that element of like, bringing back like the epic or like this idea of like responding to a call and like going outside of the forms that have been left for you. But there's also his relationship to Swarthmore, and I guess my relationship with Swarthmore is like I got a full ride to Swarthmore off of need base.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of external information and kind of ideas that. Sure. Or like, oh, you went to Swarthmore. Swarthmore's the best.
I went to. Like,
you know what I'm saying?
So,
but it's also like that's a new thing. That's a new thing. That's like Obama era stuff.
Yeah.
Of like.
I mean,
so
it's like
a conflict of the time. It's not like, and it's not clear like where you fall in.
I guess I'm just trying to clarify. I'm still thinking about Luke's question around what it means to be an American and trying to relate it to the novel. But we don't have to talk about it necessarily in relation to the novel. But there is cited like Roth as a sort of inspiration for an idea about how we should understand America. And what I'm suggesting is that the novelist's existential crisis is a function of what it means to be an American or a post-capitalist, late capitalist subject who has to...
Male subject.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. We're woke. It's important, man. The masculinity is important.
We're woke.
The masculinity is important.
But you see what I'm saying? It's like the problem that the narrator is dealing with is fashioning a self in capital A America where, I mean, obviously we have nepotism and people do follow their parents' like social class, but the individual is still at the end of the day forced to like fashion itself. And you seem to be suggesting that art is one of the ways, and literacy in particular,
Absolutely,
that we achieve that. And I just wanted you to like clarify, make that explicit, and if that's like universal, if you think that there's some other like mechanism, mode, or way to achieve self-actualization as an independent, autonomous, like self.
I'm sure there's a lot of ways. I think this is like one way, you know, and it's like a accessible way, but maybe isn't often like literature isn't often presented like that. You know what I'm saying? It's like this kind of like, and I think, you know, allowing all those different types of language into the binding of the book does come from that kind of idea of allowing everything, you know, and all the encounters are with, you know, like random people, like, you know, this kind of energy. I often think of like, it reminds me of a little bit of, like with the Bible. Well, Dante's got so much biblical stuff in there, but it's like that story is like, you know, Christ is talking to the fisherman. He's talking to that idea was never in any religious text or even the epics before that. It was only like these archetypal gods fighting, and that process continually happens where more and more things are allowed into literature, and what that does for people's ability to feel like they're participating in this whole thing.
In the culture.
Is like has like a good impact, I feel like.
A couple more questions, and then I would ask someone to like read the section, and maybe we'll open it up for comments and questions from our guests. But I guess connected to this question of America and thinking about place, can you just talk sort of briefly about how you think about place in Philadelphia as a character in the novel? And that could be either in terms of how your own artistic formation or literary formation, writing formation, was impacted by your presence in the city, or how your representation or reflection on the city impacted your...
I think like in terms of the Philly element of the book, like it's in a lot of like partially aesthetic, like a book that's like an ode to a place kind of is like an engine too, to just like fill out that map that like, you know, I drew at the end. But in terms of like, I guess with my upbringing too, is just from like, you know, being born in Japan, just like moving every couple of years, like Scotland, like, you know, it was a place that was like the place I lived for the longest time in one place down here, you know. It was a time where I could afford rent, kind of work, kind of make do, I think that was kind of an investigative engine of like writing about all the places and kind of filling out the map of it throughout the duration of the book. But someone was saying too, like, if you think of like, I was talking to someone about this earlier, you think of like, you know, Rome or like Florence, these places in like Europe that like were foundational to like the society or to the culture. Like Philadelphia is like really, it's kind of
American.
It's a lot of important American acts. You know, signings and whatnot.
I mean, sometimes it's easy to forget that.
It is easy to forget.
But like if you walk around and look at these plaques, it's like astonishing. I was actually reading a Marvel, maybe Marvel's Malcolm X biography again, and I at the time was living in Brewery Town, and Marvel puts the address that Malcolm X lived in, and it was just like 2 blocks from my house. And he was here at the same time that coal train was here. And like just to imagine them walking through the same neighborhood, like it's a remarkable city. And this Russian came in a couple of weeks ago. There's a boxing match tonight. We normally have Maurice with us, but it was fascinating. he had just come back. And this is like transnational geopolitical stuff. Like he had just come back from Saudi Arabia, where he had been in the corner of a British fighter who was fighting in a heavyweight fight. The Saudi Arabians are paying like golfers and boxers to compete in Saudi Arabia, like $1 billion. Like they're transforming many sports cultures. But then he was in New York City the following week, the day before I met him, as a cut-man in another boxing match, and he was here trying to find the pub that's in Rocky 1. He was trying to, it was like this is 1 block up, which was just like bizarre to me and like fascinating and like very interesting. So Philadelphia, like both in terms of like the geopolitical, the Declaration of Independence, Liberty Bell, and then like Rocky cultural reference points. Very fascinating. I don't. Are there any questions from the audience? Like, did anyone read?
Start. One thing that came across for me as I was like reading the book, I was also doing like partial reading, but also like the audio version that he did, which I thought was interesting. I'm curious, like at the beginning, you talk a lot about music and media, and you make some references like Sicko Mode and Chris Brown, and so I'm also curious about like what other media were like you like consuming at that time to inspire the book. And I also have this like second question that also refers to like place, as we talked about before, with like Philadelphia as this sort of like bedrock, you know, for this like journey in particular, and specifically, you know, just kind of surprised. I didn't hear John, I didn't hear Shiesty. Like, I was like, was there like any influence of like those terms while you were writing that unfortunately didn't make it to the book?
Unfortunately, I'm so glad John was in it. It's not even a word. I know.
It's interesting when you work in a vernacular where it's like you're kind of like automatically dating it. You know what I mean? Like it gets automatically dated, but I don't think that's like a detriment to it. Like I think that's part of like saying something about language, how new terms come and new terms go. You know, and I also don't think there is an element of like, this is like the he's trying to represent Philly
dictionary.
Philly vernacular.
Glossary.
Where it really is, I mean, like, and oftentimes people will focus on the slang stuff, but it's like, it's a pretty like, there's a lot of different types of, you know, I think it's a very individual type of, like, you know, language I was doing, you know, and I never really intended to make it like that. But I think that definitely was a timeline thing, I think, with when I was writing it and with the terms. But in terms of like the music stuff, like, it's, I think that's also a thing of letting, you know, if you think of the idea of like letting new, treating all, I don't know, classes or important incidental people as valuable to be told in the story. Like that's same with like the types of media. Like I feel like that's a statement I'm trying to say too, where it's like there's in terms of like high-low stuff, where it's like, you know, this music video or this song or whatever is as valuable as like I don't know, old literary text, something like that. And it's not even in a moralizing way; it's just literally experientially from the narrator. You know what I mean? But in terms of other media, I feel like sometimes, I think some like even some like comedy, besides the music that's referenced, like some comedy stuff where you're kind of like constantly turning back the expectations. I realized that later, where a lot of the chapters do follow some kind of like comedy structure where you're messing with people's expectations. And then, you know, I cited a lot of stuff in the back with like the work cited and whatnot. But that's probably the main thing that's not included in there. I feel like.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, so you didn't mention film.
Yeah, I didn't really mention film.
Do you think yourself more like, is it sonic or rather or oral instead of?
Yeah, well, I feel like the film that was, or like even like, you know, like sometimes I think of like you know, like Richard Linklater stuff, where like it would often be like one really long shot, and then you just start talking to like Slacker or something like that, and talk to someone incidental, and something comes in. Like I feel like there's some of that energy. Yeah, just kind of like.
Could you describe action more than setting?
Yeah.
It seems.
Yeah.
In this.
Yeah, and kind of. I think that's a way to just develop pace, like constantly having a task and following them through like that, you know, and not digressing. But yeah, I don't watch that many movies.
Yeah, that's it.
So there's the moment in the book where the narrator's like, I'm getting in the flow of writing and like something is hitting and I can keep going. And then it sounds like that was your experience in real life maybe as well.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm wondering like, what were like the big, or maybe a big challenge that you faced after that part? Do you know what I mean? Like when you were developing the book after you got the flow.
I think shaping a book, like there's developing the flow and then there's shaping it into a book that has like a, 300-page arc. And I think that is a different challenge, And I think for this book, the engine was to have him die and then crash out completely and have to recover. And I noticed that in a form in a lot of like novels, like there's the Blue Flower by, what's her name? Penelope. Yeah, it was like about an old German person who was a contemporary of Goethe, and that's kind of what happened, where he got sick and then like had to recover. But I was thinking of things for pace, like task and like crisis and like rebirth. I think that's like the struggle. That's the thing that gives it an arc over the period of time. But finding the flow is important too.
So the book, like, definitely, while it did, like, on a personal, emotional level for me, like, I definitely agree with what y'all were saying about it being funny at the same time. And I was just wondering, like, if there are other authors or books or works of art in general you can recommend maybe that also do that, where it's like it hits, but at the same time it's like laughing.
Yeah, I mean, definitely everything I ref, like all the books I cite, like have a specific reason and a specific thing I'm doing. The first book that I feel like it's indebted to probably is the Sarah book by Scott McClanahan. I don't know if you know that book. Okay, but you know what I mean? It's kind of like it's a crisis, and then you're laughing at the crisis, But yeah, it's another thing too, just like the playfulness and not taking it too seriously. I feel like is a big part of it. Yeah, I just recommend. You already know.
More questions, comments? Yeah, that's you.
Okay. So, I was trying to think of like my questions, but I guess I was trying, because I read this in February, so I guess the main thing that really interested me about this book was just like the idea of like auto-fiction, because I'd never really like considered that before. Like I had this book club in high school, and Bruce was in the club, and so he like
That sounds like a setup for
yeah, okay. So, because I hate talking in front of the tub.
Well, that's good, because there's not a ton of us.
So basically, we were reading The Picture of Dorian Gray around that time that I was reading this book, and I wasn't going to bring up this book. I was like, it's kind of like, I was like embarrassed of the title. I was like, I was going to bring it up with Bruce. But I was thinking to myself about, sorry, my brain is just one like, just getting.
Yeah, no, we got time.
So
look, let's clap for them. They graduated from high school a month ago. So,
so the thing that I was thinking about with like auto-fiction is more just like, at first, when I myself this question about, like, I was like, I mean, if you're writing in general, you're writing probably, like, it also like came up with this question about like influence, but then I was thinking, the question that I ended up asking the priest was like, because I was really curious with myself, because I was like, I feel like it's kind of like, I asked him, I was like, do you think it's immoral to write about, and also this was relevant because the book Picture of Green Gray, like it was about how influence, like Oscar Wilde, he says like influence is evil, and we were talking about that, and I was just like, do you think it's immoral to write about people who like are real people, like not even fictionalizing them, just I don't know, because it's like tied to the I don't know. So, and he didn't know. So
The priest didn't know?
no. So
you asked him that?
yeah, so I was like, yeah, he just didn't have an answer. So then I was like, oh God, if he doesn't even know the answer to this, I was like, this is a pretty serious question. Like, is like
No, it's no.
So I was thinking about it for a while, but
You're
yeah.
Catholic, you can't just ask God. You gotta ask a priest.
I mean, I was going in between my like relationship with God at the time, anyways. Like,
Yeah.
because like literally.
No, it's
this
a serious
whole
it's a serious
situation-
question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, no, thank you for that.
It's a real question, and that's something you gotta ask God about
But there's
as a
not-
writer.
Yeah.
But I think
You like, dear God.
yeah.
Actually, let me restate the question so that it's like clear. Because I feel like I pull up like a lot. My sister says like I'm just.
Yeah, go ahead, let's hear it.
Okay. So I guess the question is it like wrong, or is it like brave, or is it like immoral to like write about people in an autobiographical way, or like living in in just your life, or is it like less immoral to like fictionalize them? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'll say this. I'll say everyone can only write from the experience of the world that you know around you. That's all you have, right? And if you're not grappling with something that's real in your life, unless you're specifically writing in a form like, you know, a detective novel, or, you know, there's probably counterexamples to this, but the type of literary fiction that I'm interested in, if you're not grappling with anything real, it probably you won't feel the urgency. All the great novels, people are grappling with real stuff. But then that question of how you do that is a thing that I'm not joking. Where it's like you have to figure out what the right way to write about it is. And I think if you are writing in a way where you're kind of self-righteously, you know, trashing everybody around you, it probably won't be a good book. You know, so I think, you know, and a lot of people everyone's doing this in how they write. I just made a decision to at least for you to be able to assume, to feel that urgency, you know, if you're not. And I think like with the narrator, there is there's the sword always turned back on the narrator. Like if you read this book, you should probably think that like the narrator is the most morally reprehensible person in the book. And that's how I.
But in terms of like just practically, like I have friends who are fiction writers and friends who have written memoirs, and they'll actually just ask the people that they want to represent if they feel comfortable with being represented.
Yeah.
Did you do anything like that? Or do you think
Yeah.
So that's kind of like the easy out.
Yeah, but it's also
still uncomfortable.
It's also everybody is an archetype. Like, everybody in the book is an archetype. Like the naming convention is a fun bit that I did for myself. It's tied into the theme of the book. But yeah, exactly. The Bay nomenclature.
Yeah.
But again, it's like, and that's the trick of saying the narrator is you, whereas people go, oh, this is like reading really, really fast. Like anyone could do this. Like, but it's very much like, yeah, you have to find the archetypal in what you're writing for it to be good.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Go. You go first.
Well, it's kind of related to that. It's just the like the question of kind of like we were talking about, like the distance between like you and the narrator, and how like they're different, but they also come together. But if they're coming together, that must mean they're different. And I guess I'm thinking about like since this is a book you wrote a while ago now, like if and it's kind of memory, but it's also necessarily like fabricated. It's like your perspective of it, and it's also totally true. But what is real or not? I'm just wondering, like, when you read this now, does it feel like totally like aligned with like how you see it unfolding, or aligned with how you see the past, or has it changed? Like, what made me think about this was like, it kind of reminds me of like when you see a photo of yourself as a child, and soon those memories like kind of replace everything else, and then you kind of only have those memories, and you think that's how it was. I wonder if this book kind of feels like that to me in a way, like wait, I guess that's how it was, And I'm just wondering if that resonates or anything.
No, I mean, it's okay. So, like, take for everything that it's not a novel. It's not a memoir. In that, like, for example, like, I think one good example is like the narrator's relationship to his dad, right? So it's like there's like 3 scenes with his dad, right, that like convey an arc, and those are the 3 scenes that were chosen to tell the story of the narrator. So it's like, finding the archetype or the universal and the particular. It's like, why is this narrator like this? Why could someone be like this? Like, then you're saying, what's this kind of guy's relationship to his father? And so then when you're reading it, you're understanding it. Like, I don't think it's a representation. It's meant to be a representation of the past. Like, it's like everything is in service of the idea.
I think what it made me think about, like, is the past ever anything but a representation?
Exactly.
Of the past,
Absolutely.
Is
Absolutely.
Yeah. It feels as real to me as anything else.
Yeah.
I didn't read any of your book.
No problem.
First time, I drifted in here with my daughter.
Thanks for coming.
But when you wrote this book, and from that, I dug into a little bit of the podcast stuff about you. I took the soft-handed lazy man's approach.
Okay.
And I wonder, as another creative, I ask you this: so when you're doing new stuff, you try to probably move away from this a little bit, because this. I mean, do you always want to be the guy who wrote the Fuckboy book, or you you want to be slated into one place? You want to move on to other priorities. You know what I'm saying here. So this book is like. Did you write? Did anything before you wrote this book have as much heat and get as much? Is this like what brought you to here now? Where it like sparked as much interest? You see what I'm getting at here?
No, this is my first published book. Nothing I wrote before this.
So you kind of knocked it out of the park. You guys did everything you could want. And if I was listening to what my Lila was telling me, it's like you came at it in a sense of like the non-writer's writer book. You just kind of here's logic, and here's you don't got to worry about something. You're just going to type and get it out.
Okay. Yeah. There's. I think I know. Now I'm trying to understand. Now I'm trying to guess which rabbit hole of reference points you're drawing from. But no, I don't think I want to distance myself from it. I'm proud of the book.
No, it's just one song and a big album of other stuff that you'll do.
But absolutely, yeah.
Correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
definitely. I think that's anytime you publish a book, like, I worked on this book for so long, but the minute I decided to publish it, it becomes something else, and people reflect off of it, and yeah, that's part of it. Just creating something that people can engage with on their own and take in their own directions, you know. So, but I definitely am proud of it, and I stand by it. You know, I personally think it's a good book. It's really and
do you ever publish anything that you don't think is good?
Yeah.
Let me right
yeah,
now.
I delete tweets all the time.
What did you publish?
I delete tweets all the time.
Oh, tweets.
Yeah.
That's a tricky answer. I like that.
But you know, yeah.
But there are writers in here, right? Published writers, maybe aspiring. Like so how far away is this from what you hoped as far as the actual novel? Because I know that there were things that an editor would ask you to remove or add.
No. Nobody removed anything. Nobody added anything. It came out in a very unique circumstances where it was basically edited and you know, I was mentored by an editor and a publisher, and then he passed away. He overdosed like right when the book was finished. So then a big publisher bought it, and then but they didn't change anything because he was like a legendary you know, person. So that's basically a bigger publisher said, could we, you know, they wanted to buy it, and they said, well, you can't change anything. And they said, okay. So that's what happened.
And I guess one of the, like, I thought you were gonna ask, like, how do you follow this up?
Yeah,
That's kind of where I was going.
That was also my question.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. The thing is, I've just been writing like a book every few years. Like I don't really, and whenever the publishers decide to publish it, it's kind of irrelevant.
So you don't
to
feel
me.
pressure to like this, like you talked about. You know, I think you have a couple albums in your mentioned. What is that? They're not all great albums.
Yeah.
Scorpion
is like one of them.
He's put something out
how can I not have a Drake album in a book called Fuckboy?
Yeah, that's a good point. Kodak Black, Dr. Dre. Well, like, you know, like in music, it's like the sophomore slump.
Yeah.
But like, how do you sort of follow up this novel with fiction as opposed to essay? Like, do you feel burdened by the success of this as you think about what to publish next?
I mean, typecast, is that what you're asking?
No, not even typecast. More so just like you got a lot of positive, critical reactions to this. And so I would assume for others who have had such success, it's been hard to follow it up because of a kind of fear and block.
Right.
It sounds like you're not experiencing that.
I mean, yeah, I think like I was committed to try to write books for my time here before all this stuff happened with this. So I feel like just staying with that and like looking at it more like a vocation than
and that's
you know, and it's like.
So you don't think of yourself as an expressivist? Like you wake up and you write every morning because this is your work, your calling.
Yeah, we're just always thinking about stories and like the project that I'm working on, the question I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, how do you work?
Well, my
typewriter, laptop.
Oh, yeah. I actually try to handwrite stuff initially, and then I just like usually wake up and for the first like 3-4 hours of waking, if I'm depending on the stage of it, like there's just getting it down, and then there's just like kind of Tetrising it over and over again and reading it back to yourself, like. So a lot of like rereading your own stuff and making it better.
Do you read and listen to music to write, or like what's the
earplugs or sometimes music, but recently.
Yeah.
And honestly reading, like I think not too many writers overlook that. Like you know, like a lot of writers reach out to me and they want their book published immediately. Like just like I think of myself more as a reader, and then when there's a point where I understand something, then
there's
not that much writing.
Has anyone read A.N. Wilson's book on Tolstoy? It's like one of the best literary biographies you'll encounter. Like A.N. Wilson on Tolstoy. A.N. Wilson is an English writer, and it's even more impressive that he was able to write like maybe the definitive novel on Tolstoy. But there's like this Henry James. Like everyone was always waiting for Tolstoy to start writing again, and he had long periods where he claimed he was never going to write fiction anymore. He, founded a kindergarten, traveled to Germany, came back to Russia, founded his kindergarten on his estate. He was a aristocrat with serfs, which is a very interesting. Yeah. But he would teach the serfs, and he illustrated. There's like Tolstoy children's books in Russian, but when he was about to write fiction, he started reading Henry James, and his wife would write his letters. Is how we know it. He was like Lev is reading Henry James. Like he started reading Henry James before he would start writing fiction. That was like the
nice.
Time.
Yeah.
Like, is there someone that's inspiring for you that? Where
I always have somebody that I'm kind of like
during different periods.
Yeah, different periods, and then it's reading. Writing should just be because I don't. People say they wake up and I write 10 hours a day. It's like. You're making I definitely think it's like that. It's like when you're so sick of reading that nothing is hitting for you. Mm-hmm. If something's reading and interesting to you, you should keep reading that. Mm-hmm. And finally, when no one else is doing what you want to be doing, then I write something like that kind of.
I love that idea. It's like you kind of it's you find your way to where the road stops. And it's your challenge.
Yeah, exactly. And that idea of a thing to follow. Self-formation. Mm-hmm. I really think it's like reading,
yep.
and going through the whole process, seeing a narrative start to finish,
Other questions? Yeah.
I have a question I'm wondering how you deal with stylistic comparisons when people talk about your writing specifically with this book, and also
be more direct. Go ahead, say it.
Say it. Don't beat around the bush.
Don't beat around the bush.
This book was well loved by a lot of indie heartthrob writers. I love Sheila Marie, so that was cool, but equally as controversial in other literary spheres. So I'm wondering how you navigated that.
Yeah, that's not controversial. I mean, to me, it's not. It's basically you have you're talking about the influence of certain of Sam Pink. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah, and it's totally influenced. He's a big influence. That's why I say he's a big influence. And he was a friend, and then Gian dies. It's gonna be, money, attention. People get upset. It's that happens.
More money, more problems.
Yeah, and it's but it's also it's one. As much as he's influenced, it's just one of a big tapestry of influence. You know what I mean? I think it's
But is there a line? How do you think about that?
No, there's no line.
Yeah,
no line.
It's just influence.
Yeah, I mean, if it's so easy, go do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why did what happened? Why did I always forget this story because when Lil Wayne got mad at Young Thug, mm-hmm. But then I think Thug actually shot up Wayne's tour bus. But so I don't know how that would fit into the archetype of what we're talking about. I guess.
Yeah, literary writers shooting at each other sounds.
But
I would love to read that book.
You write an essay.
Yeah. No, and I mean, there's a bigger story.
No,
there's a bigger story to all that.
But influence is interesting, just in general. I think about this all the time. I don't write fiction, but just in terms of within academia, if you're a literary critic or you're a philosopher, and Guy Debord, we're talking about, mm-hmm. The great, you might say Foucault, but my grandma probably taught me more than Foucault, and so citation and all these ideas about influence. And even you in this book, like the way that you cite influence is very specifically focused on.
But that's what Red's got
figures.
too, you know? So
Yeah,
all that.
I know that's what you're saying. Like
It's
we're all
incredibly
influenced by
open.
such a wide array of people.
Yeah, but that's part of the point of the book. Is like you
Yeah.
should be reading people and like trying to learn about yourself through them.
Yeah, or even I mean the way that language is used in your book, and this is one of the things that someone like Ralph Ellison would make a big deal about. Is like you can't get Moby Dick or Melville without black vernacular.
Yeah.
Right. The black vernacular has infected or impacted highbrow literature. You're just not really thinking about it in the right way.
Yeah.
And so you're living in Philadelphia, and you know John is a reference. Like you're moving through a context where there are people whose rhetorical performance is really the only currency that they have, and so you're benefiting from that.
Yeah, vernacular comes from like listening to the world around you and writing like that, rather than just responding to a literary tradition.
Everywhere in the world. Yeah, I see a hand.
I just wanted to follow up on that question because you said there was no line for you when it comes to how you take inspiration and write. So I was curious, you place that in when you place that in the context of saying, well, like, oh, it's just so easy if why doesn't anybody do it if it's just so easy to copy style? Do you think that people's position in life makes it easier for some people than not for others? So you copy style that somebody else who spent years working on and developing?
No, I think what he's saying is that he's been accused of plagiarism by a very particular person.
Oh no, I know the same thing article.
Okay.
What I'm saying
separate question.
If there's no line to how you're influenced by somebody else's work, and you say, oh, if it's so easy, anybody can do it, but anybody being able to do it is really just people with certain positions in life being able to do it a little bit.
No, I think he was just saying
that. Not draw a line.
No, I got you.
Line with the influence.
No. I'm saying any literary technique, is usable by anybody. You know what I'm saying? Like you're talking about the Sampson essay. You know, where did that style come from? Have you read any other writers who write in centigraphs? There's a whole tradition of people who write in that style. That was one specific person that I cited, you know, and then a bunch of character attacks came off of that, right? So is it the presumption that like I'm somehow of a higher socioeconomic mode?
Well, that's the question I'm asking. There's no
and what's that
line of
based on?
influence that you
No. Any technique. That's what writing is. You're where else would you get it from? You're reading things, and you're taking techniques you like. In terms of your voice, this is my voice.
Yes.
You know, 100%. This is a 350-page novel that employs many different forms. This is a man who's like, it goes deep. It goes deep. But you know what I'm saying? Like upset about a lot of different things, and like it's not like, you know, have you read any of his books?
But I think they're trying to get you to talk about the question in a
I'm
different
talking more about
context.
you saying there's no line.
There's no line about a literary technique that you can take.
No.
Absolutely not.
So he's saying that Sam Peake should write something that is this beautiful or excellent if it's so easy to write this beautifully or excellent. But I think what they're trying to say is that insofar as we can extrapolate from this specific incident some idea about what sort of homage and duties we have with respect to other people's styles.
Yeah.
Are you not overstating?
That's not his style.
No.
That's not his style.
No, set aside Peake.
Okay, yeah.
Like, I think the question is, like, are you only able to achieve this level of literary success or excellence because of some privileges that you have that other people don't have? I think that's the question.
I think...
And when there's no line to the influences that you... Like, how you are influenced by other books and how much of those influences you place in your book, your position in life, do you believe that has an impact on why maybe some things succeed and some things don't?
I think you can. I think if you are open about, I think if you are in a writing program or something like that. You know, if you absolutely where you decide where you're coming from and where you publish things and the people around where you are. If you're in New York, you know, absolutely, I think might help you get more people to read it. But the implication that a style can be kind of like cranked out in this way is I think and that there's some person that's the originator of the style. No one's the originator of any style, you know, and I think that's a really bad idea to be spreading, because it's A, not true, and B, the implication is that you shouldn't read aggressively and try to learn different things. You know what I'm saying? Like, what is a writing class? You read a bunch of different techniques and you try to do them. You know, I think imitation of writing techniques is a really good way to learn to write. You know, just like, you know, Sam Pink did for many other people. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's all I'm trying to say. Plagiarism.
You're trying to say the beef
plagiarism
is ongoing.
Plagiarism is a different thing. Plagiarism is a different thing, and it's a real thing. You know,
was beef.
And it has nothing to do with me. Yeah, it has nothing to do with me.
But because the accusation definitely wasn't like, I feel like Terrance was like, hey, you got to read the Sam Pink thing before, and I hadn't read it. But it's not. The accusation isn't plagiarism, right? The accusation is you stole my style, which is you can't steal a style.
Yeah, and it's also it's also a bunch of character text.
Yeah,
it's a hysteria.
You can steal a style though.
You can. That's
Yeah, you can steal a style. But it's
but there's no original.
You can borrow a
style. I mean, there's no original style.
So to think about it in terms of the individual is like one thing. To think about it in terms of like culture is another. Like I actually agree with Elsie that all culture is appropriation.
Okay.
But clearly within like go back to music.
Who started singing? Rap?
No. But but clearly there are styles, and clearly styles can be appropriated. Like whether we want to use the legalistic language, theft is like a separate question. But you can copy someone's style.
But there's nothing wrong with copying.
Everybody is copying other people's techniques.
No, that's fine. But I think that it makes sense to think about style in relationship to cultures and peoples, and you know, so just think about like jazz and blues in the mid 20th century. There are clearly people raiding certain clubs, emulating that music, recording it, knowing that they didn't originate it, and taking credit for it. So like within the context of culture, theft is possible.
Right.
But whether we want to use that language,
someone coming into an external culture, right?
Yeah.
And doing that. There's no like writing in centigraphs, moving down the page like that. There's no like insulated culture of that.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
I wouldn't disagree with that necessarily.
And it's like, yeah, and it's like. I guess I gotta write some.
Yeah, no, we have to
gotta write some.
But it just depends upon how you think about culture and technique, right? So like, what's
right? But any assumption that like alt-lit, which is a bunch of rich white kids writing about how sad they are, or some underprivileged group that I am pillaging is absurd.
No, I wouldn't disagree with that.
Okay? Like that's all there is to say.
But you made more abstract claims. Like style can't be stolen, but I think it can.
Yeah, and it's gonna be good. I don't know.
I mean, Post Malone is just really popular. Super popular. But I don't think that
fourth espresso was a mistake.
Elvis was dope too. Any more? Yeah.
I just want to clarify, like, cool the heat a little bit. I'm really more interested in like how you feel about that stuff, like as an aspiring person who like makes things in the world. Once you hit a certain audience, certain sides,
Yeah.
you're gonna receive that regardless.
Absolutely.
Regardless of what truth is.
Yep.
And I'm just curious, like, how does it feel? Like, how do you navigate that? You have like a lot of people backing you who are really successful and really great. Does that help? What is like the personal side of that? Like, what is just like your situation?
It can be upsetting, you know, when you see people like writing stuff and like making stuff up about you for sure. And it is a little bit different writing your first book and writing after that. But I think it's important to, it's just a thing you gotta learn to do it, you know. But if no one's doing that, you're probably not doing anything.
Yeah.
No, yeah. Yep.
Damn. I had a feeling this was
We're not gonna end on this note though.
No, we got
No, it's good. It's good.
So like, all right. So I guess this is always my question. So what are you reading right now?
I'm just reading Dante right
Just
now.
Dante.
Yeah. I'm writing a long Dante thing.
Okay.
Yeah. So just Dante. I'll be coming soon. Yeah.
Does anyone have a copy of the book that read the book? You have it with you?
What's that?
Oh, I have a copy.
Do you have a part that you read to us? No? Are you a great reader?
I'm trying to volunteer.
Your voice is great though. It sounded like a NPR voice.
Go read it in private. You know. It's an intimate book.
Read it in private. You know, I wanted to give people a sense of the language. I know you read some. So like I don't use profanity, so I have like a hard time reading this out loud.
But you asked me to do it.
Yeah. What's that?
I said, so you cold called someone?
No, I didn't cold call it.
You should read.
I asked them if they would.
You should read.
You can say yes or no.
Someone should read page 79. It's really great.
You read it.
Sure. What I'd reference in my latest podcast was something Shayla Hetty had on hers. On her podcast and Raisins. She posted 4 episodes in the past 4 years. The first 2 were from the same week, in 2015. They were conversations with her brother on a lake in Canada somewhere about philosophy and the point of art. Possibly unserious. But then, out of nowhere, she posted another, last week. A rant, really. Going in about how critics misunderstood her most recent book, Motherhood, 2018, as a polemic when what it was a personal account. How critics, in the US especially, and especially since Trump, tended to politicize all art. This is so good. When art, that was my comment, when art was specifically and categorically was not meant to be politicized. To politicize art was to misunderstand its point, to misuse its function. How artists today were becoming more like entrepreneurs. Not that there was anything wrong with entrepreneurs, it was just entrepreneurs were entrepreneurs, politicians, and artists. Everyone had their role. The artist role, Sheila reiterated, was not to be political. It was to be honest and uncompromising, to shake people, to, as DFW via Roque put it, disturb the comfortable and comfort the disturbed. X-Bay reminded me of this. We used to tell each other this often.
Nice.
I like that part. It's great. It's great. Yeah. You should go listen to the audiobook though. It's great.
Thank you.
The audiobook's great.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
No, that is a nice passage. No one wants to read?
I'll read,
Yeah.
but I don't have the book.
You don't have the book.
What page should I read?
Oh.
Check page 80.
Page 80?
What is
The
it?
next page?
We got what?
You can read
I mean,
section.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think the first 3 chapters have a somewhat different. Sean is nice. Chapter 3.
What page?
23.
Sean. Went out to my stoop to smoke to stimulate the stimulants I just railed. Park it up, clear night, hold the shit still. But clear, meaningful, second of the month. The first was on the first. That happened infrequently, I read. Something in the air. Had a round of edits on my walkbook manuscript from editor Bay to get to, but first had to figure out what my name was. I had too many names. Sean Conroe, my American legal. Sean Thor Conroe? Am I saying it right? Okay. Full American legal. Either worked with the middle adding a tad of writerly pretension, but so Anglo, all Anglo, ignoring the
The whole thing?
It's only like 5 feet. We're trying to learn. We're trying to be more literary.
I can go with
It's
the next
Passport, the
question.
Japanese.
It's
Yeah.
Passport, the Japanese birth countries read Sho Komura. Could take the first or last. People did that, I was pretty sure. Could go Sho over Sean. What I was most leaning towards. Only Sean was what I responded to in the world. They called Sean and I answered. So then, the matronym? That was woke. She who raised me. Why should he get all the names? Not to mention, as I'd only recently learned, Conroe wasn't even my birth great-grandpa. That was Rucker. Only Rucker hung himself when Grandpa, Rucker's son, was 1. Step-great-grandpa Conroe came later when Grandpa was 8. And only for 4 years. Conroe left Grandpa's mom when Grandpa in his teen years. Rucker, though. Crank out your first son. Baby suddenly hogging all the wifey's attention. Fuck this, I'm out. At least he just hung himself. Bullets are messy. Wouldn't want to make a mess. So I guess Rucker would be the last option. The pure blood patronymic. But no, fuck Rucker. Bitch ass bowed out before the game even started. This got me hitting, moon peaking, bursting, stubbed out my cig, started rolling another. Show had to be. The writing self was the private self, the hidden self, for show. I'm going to stop there. Is that okay?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not commanding anything. I'm making requests. Can you?
Yeah. Guy I hadn't seen before, coming down the street, walking quickly, not carrying anything. Time my "What's up, man?" head nod when he passed. He'd already been looking at me.
It's what up.
What? Come on, what up, man? Head nod when he passed. He'd already been looking at me when I looked up. Held his gaze, lingered. I lingered. Got another one of those? Sure, I said, beckoning like pull up a chair. He sat on the top step leading up to the stoop, level with the stoop. Here, have this one, I said, handing him the one I'd just lit. Sat back down on my chair, wedged between the dresser drawers and the bedside tables I'd found separately in trash piles. Started rolling myself another. When I looked up again, he was looking up at me again. Dragging, head tilted, gaze intense. Like checking me out intense. Ah, this moon though, huh? I said. He looked up at the moon. After some moments, once I got my cig going, what you doing out and about this late, anyhow? Shoot, he said, shifting. You know. I looked up. Like, no, not really. Just out here trolling? Just out here, trying to get it? That fire. I need that fire. I see, I said. That fire, yes. I dragged. He dragged. You trying to stay around here? He indicated the direction. Okay. Well, hey, what's your name? Sean. I looked at him, eyes wide. Like, gotta be kidding me. Bro, mine too. I stood, walked over, dapped him up before, not knowing where else to walk, returning to my seat and sitting.
Yeah, I struggle with that too.
Yeah, I wasn't
What
sure.
is this?
Yeah, you gotta.
SH.
Oh, SH? SEA?
Oh!
Yeah.
Okay, what are we in? SH.
Oh, SH. Types of Sean.
Like SH.
Yeah.
How you spell your name?
Yeah.
Yeah. Terrance, you got it.
Okay. ESCA. Right?
Yeah.
But hey, sounds the same, innit? Observing based on the acceleration of my speech, the stimulants were hidden. He smiled, amused, dragged, I dragged. So you just out here. Hey, he said, serious, suddenly. You hung? What? I said, cocking my head, like, come again? He said, are you hung? He was smiling again. Like, he nodded down. Ah, like that. I dragged. You know, not so much, honestly. Can I see? I let out a laugh. Nah, bro, nah. I'm really good, he said. The best. I believe you. He gestured like, so what's the problem? That's just not my mode right now, I said. He stared at me blankly after some moments. So that's how you're able to survive like that? Doing that? He looked down, shook his head, side, I'm able to get going quiet a sec, rubbing his face, either itchy or distressed, I couldn't tell, then looking up, grinning, and saying, I'm able to get what I need. Food? Not food. The moon and this crackling ember appearing seemingly suddenly, like the lone lights in a sea of darkness. But that fire, when I need it, I do what I gotta do to get it. I considered this, then said, I feel you, bro. I effing feel you. Taking one final greedy drag before stepping out and stuffing the butt into the overflowing butt jar on the bedside table. That's the end of the chapter. Okay. Well, I think that's enough. That's a lovely way to sort of end this. Beautiful novel. I think that one of the things about it that I appreciate is the controversy, because controversy is provide opportunities to raise these important questions and have these conversations. I appreciate everyone for coming. Want to thank Luke and Sean for initiating a conversation that culminated with this visit. And just join me in a round of applause for Sean. A great book. If you haven't read it, I do have copies. I'm feeling generous. I'll give you a copy if I have enough. Yeah, but thank you, and I appreciate you all. Hope you have a great night.